Most of us, at least at one time or another, will be the recipients of data from others. And when that happens, there's a couple of things to keep in mind. First, what do we know about the source? For one thing, is it in their interest for the data to show a particular result? For example, if we're getting data from a corporation, it's in their interest to show that their product offering is better than the competitors or their company is somehow better than competing companies. Similarly, if we're getting data from a political party, it's in their interest to show their party in the most favorable light possible. Now, this isn't to say that they'll deliberately skew the results or they're completely untrue results that are being presented, but it is to say just beware because perhaps they're cherry picking only the favorable results. Perhaps they're being presented in such a way that just shades them to look better for them than for the alternative organizations. Compare that to a truly objective third party, something like Consumer in New Zealand, where they are a relatively unbiased third party just trying to do comparisons among alternatives, or a journalist or something like that. Next, consider whether the source has a history of producing credible results. Have we seen in the past that what they say tends to be true, or do they have a track record of saying one thing where in the end evidence proves that what they said was not right? The more that they do have a good track record of producing credible results, the more likely it is that the current results that we're looking at are credible also. Another thing to consider is whether they've described the methods that they use to collect the data and analyze the data and reach the conclusion, and whether all of that appears sound. Certainly, for example, if you think about academic research, one of the hallmarks of that is that there's a lot of explanation about what was done and why it was done and how it was done. And the whole point of that is so other researchers can look at that and assess for themselves whether that seems like a good way to go about things. In many other settings, there wouldn't be that much detail about methodology, but often there's at least some about who they talk to, how many people they talk to, how they analyze results, and so on. And that can help give us a sense of whether we should be confident in the results or not. Also, if possible, it's good to do a few reality checks. For example, sometimes we might be getting external data, but we've got some internal data source that we can compare it against. We wouldn't typically have all of the same data because then we wouldn't need the external data source. But if we have a few data points in common in an internal data set, maybe it's comparing a whole bunch of organizations and we know the data for our organization. If the data that we do have internally matches that external data source, then we can be pretty confident that the rest of the data in the external source is probably fine too. But when we do that comparison, if what the external data source is saying is really different from our internal data, which we know to be correct, then we have reason to be skeptical of all of the other external data. Something else that we can do as a reality check is to check other data sources. So we might have different surveys or a survey and some qualitative data, different data sources looking at the same general area. If they're all pointing to a fairly similar conclusion, then we can have greater confidence in any single result than we could if that one result is really an anomaly compared to the other data sources we have. Then we really want to look into why is that? Were they talking to different people? Did they do the analysis in a different way? What's different about it? We can also compare results to benchmarks. So this might be the same results last year or the same results from a different country or something like that. And does the current result seem valid based on what we know about those other benchmarks? For example, you wouldn't expect a huge difference in a survey that's conducted every year unless something pretty dramatic has happened during the year. So if there is a big deviation from year to year and yet nothing has happened to explain that, then we might want to go look into the methodology and see if anything was done differently this year compared to last year.